They say that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I don't know who they is or are, but they're right. Planning is really important. And there are multiple ways that you can plan. And there are many ways that you can plan correctly. And there are a lot of ways that you can plan incorrectly. And a lot of people, a lot of business owners, a lot of individuals have a very hard time in talking about kind of post life, either life of a person or life of a business entity or life of an organization transition when it comes to a transference of assets, intellectual property, et cetera, physical capital assets, blah, 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 blah. But there are some angles to that folks don't really consider. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, Michael Zwick is a friend of mine. We've chatted before, and we chatted about he's an inheritance investigator, inheritance planning expert. And I remember he explained this to me because I was like, "Isn't this is inheritance planning the same as succession planning, or is it the same as estate planning?" He's like, "No, no, 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 way different." And he explained it to me, and it was super interesting. And I was like, "Man, more people need to be aware of this." And that's what we're going to talk about today. It's important for you personally. It's important for your business. It's important. You name it, it's important. You should know about it. And we're going to dive into all this awesome tomfoolery right after this very loud video. All right. Now I'm motivated. Now I'm pumped up. Thank you, everybody. If no matter what you're watching or listening through, please drop us a line in the comments. Say howdy. We love to hear from you. If you have questions for me or for Mike, throw them out there. But without further ado, my friend, Mike Zwick, how are you, friend?
I'm doing great, Adam. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I wanted to be really careful about how I introduced this because I remember I remember us talking about this, and there's like the delicate line of understanding between like estate succession and inheritance planning is very different. So can you explain what is inheritance investigation and inheritance planning? How is it different, and why should people care?
Okay, so I'm going to kind of take the first one
Sure.
second, and the second one first. So inheritance planning, better known as estate planning, is what someone does when they want to prepare for their demise, however long in the future it might be. Some people don't do it until they get that, get your affairs in order notice from their doctor. Some people start doing it when they're in their 20s or 30s and in good health. And will constantly, hopefully, if they're doing it right, will constantly update it throughout their lives as they go through any major changes. Basically, though, in a nutshell, what estate planning is basically saying, here's what I want to happen to my stuff when I pass away.
Right.
I want, this person to get this share of my estate. I want that person to get this much money, or that my car collection, whatever the case might be. That's basically what estate planning is. And there are other things that go into it, such as medical power of attorney if you're unable to make medical decisions for yourself. But estate planning, in a nutshell, is basically planning for what will happen to your stuff after you pass away.
Who gets my Pokemon cards?
You better decide about that.
Well, because you don't want the family to fight over them or your Beanie Babies. You know what I mean?
The question for me is I collect college T-shirts in my travels, and
Yeah?
people ask me who's going to get them, and I say, you know what, I haven't specified that I will yet.
Why? What? Okay, hold on. Why did you start collecting college T-shirts?
I just started collecting them. They're good kind of mementos of my travels, and Nowadays, you can't tell from what I'm wearing right now, but for the most part, living in Florida now year round and working from home, may as well be comfortable.
Right on. Yeah.
So I get to wear my t-shirts, and as I started wearing them since COVID started, it's like, I may as well start wearing my t-shirts every day. And now I
Right.
even get gifts from people where people like they know I collect them, so they'll send me one as a gift or a thank you for something I might have done.
What's
So
your
yeah,
what's your favorite campus that you've visited so far?
so I don't get them all on campus. I like the smaller campuses.
Okay.
Yeah, I some of them I've been to the campus. If I'm driving somewhere and I know I have time and I see a sign for some random college, well, yeah, I'll go there and just stop
Oh,
in
yeah.
and walk into the bookstore. And other ones I'll just get. My rule for if I'm buying them myself is I buy them in the states where the college or university is. So the bigger schools are easier to get because that you can buy. If I'm in Florida, buying a University of Florida t-shirt is pretty easy.
Yeah, not
Uh,
hard. Yeah.
Buying a Stetson University one, you actually have to go to campus and buy it at the bookstore.
Right,
Uh,
right. Oh,
so
interesting.
yeah,
Well,
so
cool. That was totally random side tangent, but I just found that very interesting. So we've explained estate planning.
yes.
What is the difference then?
Okay, so that's the estate planning. What I do is I get involved almost always after the person has passed away, and the family will come to me and say, "We don't know what assets our loved one owned, or we kind of know where things are, but frankly, we just don't have the time or the ability to deal with it." Usually, the people who are giving executors, the people who are handling the estates after someone's passed away, tend to be family members, which means they're now grieving, most likely, for hopefully. Not that I want people to grieve, but hopefully
Not a
they're
guarantee.
hopefully they are feeling some sort of emotional loss if they've lost someone who's close to them.
Sure.
So they're dealing with that. Usually the person who is handling things, as the executor, tends to be the children. And if you look at the average age of someone dying is usually late 70s, that means the children are often going to be in their, say, 40s or 50s, meaning people who are still working, still have usually younger children. So they got a lot on their plate. Add to that the grieving, and then add to that the duty of being the executor.
Hmm.
So we started Inherit More with the purpose of helping people get that load off of their plate, so to speak. So what we do is we will do an investigation. First, we'll talk to the family, get an idea of who the decedent was. Deceased or decedent, it depends on which phrase you like to use. And then we will do an investigation, see what assets he or she left behind. And then we'll do all the legwork to get those assets into the hands of the family.
Now, if the deceased has an estate plan, is there still a need for an inheritance investigator? Like if their estate plan is ironclad, is there still a need? Is there still stuff that is often missed by people on the receiving end?
Yes, that's actually a great question. There's a big misconception about estate plans, which is that if you have a will that you're taken care of, or on the flip side, if you don't have a will, the heirs are up, are up the creek without a paddle. Neither of those is true. And the reason is that a will often doesn't specify what assets somebody owns. For example, thank God my parents are still alive, but their will basically says that upon each one's death, the spouse gets everything, and then if the spouse is not around at that time, then everything goes to the grandchildren in certain percentages, and that's all it says. It does not mention one asset that my parents own. It doesn't mention their house. It doesn't mention any sort of brokerage accounts or checking accounts or whatever. It doesn't mention anything, and that is a clear-cut, valid will that should be fine. On the flip side, if someone does that will, because wills don't often list assets, then the absence of a will is not going to ruin anything. Now, yes, it is good for people to have a list of what they own and separate from the estate plan, and to update that on a regular basis, because things change. I mean, my father, who's 86 and still works full time, he does a lot of it. He does investing on this, on the side, not as his business, but he is actively investing. He sometimes is asked to be on boards of companies, and for that he gets stock. So my father's portfolio, for example, changes all the time. Now I'm due to sit down with him pretty soon and kind of go over things. Say, hey, what, and I don't need to know what the amounts are. It's none of my business at this point. But being that I will be at some point the executor of his estate, I do want to know where things are, not necessarily what everything's worth.
Hmm. What's something that you find that your clients are often surprised? I mean, the program's called Inherit More. So if you have a client that's like, we got a will, we got an estate plan, we're good to go. What are some things that you sometimes turn up that weren't on the list, that may not have been considered, that somebody on the receiving end of your services would be like, whoa, good find?
So it could really be anything. It could be, a checking account that people didn't say anything about. Sometimes people, especially older generations, like to kind of keep their money sprinkled among different banks. It comes from the fear of the depression and runs in the banks being closed down. So people just would scatter their stuff around different things. Some could be insurance policies. Sometimes, back many years ago, people would buy insurance policies back when there were door-to-door insurance salesmen, and
Mm,
someone might buy a policy and just stick it in a drawer and forget about it. And then decades later, that policy is still in force. So
mm,
it could be anything. The reason we name the company Inherit More is because now we're helping people to inherit, but we're helping them to inherit more. It's
mm,
kind of like when someone has a realtor. Yes, someone could sell the house themselves, but they have to do all the legwork for it. And most likely, the realtor is going to bring in a better offer
mm.
than the person was going to get themselves, and most likely more they're going to get. They're bringing in enough extra money that's going to offset whatever that commission might be.
Right. I can't help but think of like hiring a tax professional. You can do the
Right.
taxes yourself, or you can hire somebody, and of course they get a commission, but they're going to end up finding more probably, which will offset the cost of the commission and take all of that weight off of you, which your time and your mental health is valuable, right? So
Exactly.
do you find people in general are like, "Oh my gosh, I am just so glad. Like, thank you. You saved my life here."
Yeah, there definitely are some of those people who they just it's like I said, it's beyond them at that, especially at that particular
Mm,
time when they've lost a loved one. They're dealing with the their lives, their families, their businesses or their jobs, and people don't realize just how what a how much time and emotion and energy being an executor can be.
mm,
Like I have a friend who's the rabbi of a large synagogue in the Detroit area I'm friends with. And when we started the company a few years ago, he was telling me that when his father passed away, he said, as someone who's a clergy, someone who's counseled people through major life moments,
mhm,
he says, I was prepared emotionally for the loss. He says, because I've had that front row seat to so many other people losing loved ones. So even
mm,
though it hurt, terribly, I was at least prepared for the loss, and I could knew how to process. He says, nothing prepared me for probate. He
mm.
said, I never had any idea how much time and energy I was going to have to put into being the executor until I had to go through it. It's tough. It's something people don't really talk about too much. Not because it's so much of a dirty secret. It's not one of those cocktail party conversations where
Yeah,
people sit
right.
around talking like, "So, what's your executor experience like?"
Mm. It's an awkward thing to talk about.
Yeah.
It's how do you broach conversations? I mean, do you just come in after the fact, or is it ever something that's set up like we know the end is near? Is there anything you do on the front end, or is it always after someone has died?
Usually it's after someone's died. We do every so often get that call. Usually, kind of sheepishly,
Mm,
someone calls us and says, so and so, my whatever parent or uncle or aunt or whatever is in hospice, and we don't think they have much longer. Um, is it too early for us, to consult you? And they feel like it sounds very cruel of them to do so.
mm,
And I always say, like, my response to them is, well, you obviously don't want to start rating the bank accounts or anything like that. I
mm,
said, but I don't see anything wrong with at least trying to get your arms around where assets are. Partly because if no money has been set aside for funeral, you want
mm.
to be able to tap into that. Funerals are getting more and more expensive.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think it's okay to say, as long as you're not being like I said, ghoulish about it, you're not trying to get the money the day before the body's
Right.
even cold.
Right.
I think it's okay to say, listen, let's just get a jump start on this. That's just my opinion. I'm sure there
Mm.
are people who will disagree with me, but that's just me.
Have you ever had a client that was that like the ghoul that you could just tell that they wanted the Mercedes and they wanted to drain the bank account? I'm sure you probably can't talk about it.
We never really had we never had so much like that as we've had some people who are just in a really bad situation, and all they can think about is money.
Mm,
And our so my first company, which is still around, Assets International, we what that company is, we find money and then we go find the owners, which is the reverse process. I'll never
mm,
forget, we once had a case where we were working on we had found some money that belonged to a woman that the state was holding for her, and while we were recovering it, her daughter calls me, and it was about 8 o'clock in the morning, calls me and says, yeah, my mom died a few hours ago. I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. She said, will I still be able to get this money? I mean, literally, when you say you hear the old saying, the body wasn't cold.
yeah.
Literally, the body wasn't cold.
Yeah.
Um, and I just, I was kind of floored, and I just
Mm,
said, yes, you'll be able to, but why don't you focus? And she always asked the question, why don't you really kind of focus on what you need to do right now in terms of getting ready, dealing with your mother's death. The money's not going anywhere. You will still get it. We will still work for you, but let's just, and I got the phone, and I was relating this to one of my employees, and she was appalled that I said, I'm not angry or appalled. I said, I feel sad, like that's this
mm,
person's first reaction, that, that either they need so much money or that's just how they process. I mean, everybody
right.
processes the loss of a loved one differently. And I'm not going to judge someone based on how they handle things like that.
You said something that really piqued my interest. You said finding money. Can like with your other business, like the reverse inheritance investigation, are you saying that like you look for maybe people who have gone through uh an estate or a will process and maybe in the past and something was missed and you're finding accounts and reconnecting people with that, or what does that mean?
So there is a ton of money sitting in government treasuries all across the country. State treasurers are sitting on what's called unclaimed property, which is assets that are sitting around for a certain period of time. Then the holders of those assets turn over to the state. But we also deal with other stuff, such as cases in probate where someone dies, and say, just to give an example, person dies, says, I leave $50,000 for my nephew Johnny, and nobody can find Johnny. So we'll look for Johnny and say, hey, Johnny, great news, we found money for you. So it's not always stuff that, some of it is stuff that slips through the cracks of probate. Sometimes it's the owner's still alive. Sometimes the money can belong to major corporations or nonprofits that they just don't know about. That just
Huh.
slips through the cracks. So what we do is we get lists of money of all these different from all the different government agencies as we can, and then we try to find the owners and get them their money. So
How
yeah.
does that conversation go? Because if somebody called me and was like, hi, you don't know me, but I just found an account with your name on it that has $50,000 in it, And all you have to do to claim it is like, I would be hanging up
Okay,
like
so
mid-sentence. How
we
do you
we have
do that?
we've long said that our biggest competition is not other company, it's skepticism.
Mm,
And we recognize that that is a natural reaction, which is why early on in our company's um, infancy, for lack of a better term, we spent some time and frankly money to make sure that we were presenting a very credible
mm,
presentation to people. So when we send out a contract to someone, we make sure they know we are a licensed and bonded private investigation agency. We have a plus rating with Better Business Bureau.
mhm,
We will usually, if we're sending the contracts coming on our stationery, we welcomed, we have a reprint from a Washington Post article that mentioned us pretty favorably.
mm.
And so we make sure that they see that we are a real company. Now, yes, we still got people who are skeptical. We joke in our office. There was one time we found actually money for someone in Nigeria, and
And you're thinking
uh,
of the Nigerian prince.
and we were laughing that this
Yeah.
guy, when we call the guy, he's probably going to go, "Great, another one of these Americans saying I've got a fortune waiting for me."
Another one of those American princes, and yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, so it's something that we definitely have to contend with on a regular basis.
Mm.
But we do everything we can to show them that we're a legitimate company.
So a lot of our viewers and listeners are business owners or entrepreneurs. Do you find that when the deceased is or was a business owner, that complicates things as far as inheritance is concerned? Are there additional considerations? Are there things that a business owner it would be advantageous for them to do in their succession planning, or is there a different avenue, or is it kind of all the same?
So a business owner, when should always have, even if it's a one person operation, should have a variety of succession plan documents.
Mm,
First is saying who gets the company. If not, then it's going to pass to whoever inherits the rest of that person's estate. Um, and sometimes especially if it's a small business, the owner might say, I don't want, I want this particular son or daughter to inherit the business separate from the rest of my assets.
mm,
So that can be in the will, it could be in the articles of incorporation or other corporate documents. But I think it's also important for a business owner to have a what we call my business the kind of break glass in case of emergency, where we
mm.
have a document that my partner and my VP, who is privy to a lot of, not everything, but a lot of the stuff in our business, um, what we should know in case somebody, for one reason or another, doesn't show up for work, is never show up for work again. We used to call it the getting hit by a bus thing, but it could
Right.
just be also, someone, we win the lottery, go, see you later, suckers, I'm out of here.
Mhm.
Um, and because my partner and I and our VP all fill very distinct roles that don't always have much overlap. So, for example, my partner handles, he's the COO and handles kind of the finances and stuff like that. So I handle certain other things. So we make sure we have this document in our cloud that gives all the information with passwords and all that other stuff, that make, and if you're thinking you're into it, it's pretty secure if anyone's getting at any
Sure.
bad motives there. But no, so that's that I would recommend. I know I have a friend who was a business owner, who unfortunately just passed away one day, just suddenly from a heart attack. And some friend and his wife had zero clue about anything in the business. And it was a small operation, but it still took some friends, especially with accounting background, some serious amount of time to get into everything and untangle everything and figure out, just to keep the doors open,
Mm.
and the lights on, was such a burden on people. And so it's yeah, I think it's really incumbent, even if you're a one person operation, to have that document and at least have one other person know where that document is, that says here's how to keep things running if I'm ever gone.
Do you anticipate there being a change in some of what you do with the kind of advent of decentralized finance, cryptocurrencies, NFTs? We had a guest talking about NFTs last week. Have you run into that yet? Maybe the family doesn't know that the deceased had like 5 Bitcoin. Is acquiring that a little bit different? Or haven't you run into that yet?
Haven't run into it yet, but so I'm not too well versed in Bitcoin, but I know last year I attended a virtual estate planning webinar on Bitcoin,
Hmm.
and the big takeaway I got from that is keep a hold of that key, or make sure someone has that key,
Yeah.
because if you don't have it, it's gone forever.
Right.
So I think it's one of those things that it's not really an issue for us, because if the family has the information, they have the key, they don't need us. And if they
Right.
don't have the key, there's nothing we can do. Um,
Interesting.
so yes, I mean, obviously we would, if there's a compute, if some, like, for some of our cases, the person has passed away years ago. In some cases, the person has just recently passed away. If they left a computer behind, then we can get into the computer
Mm.
and kind of poke around and see what information we can find, because we're always wanting to see like what assets might be out there. So we'll look for information on that, and if we find it, great. But I don't think it really is that much of a, like I said, yes, it could make things complicated in the future if people are putting a lot of their money into it.
Mm.
Also, a lot of our estates we're dealing with are people who tend to already be in their 70s or 80s, and not to stereotype, but I think Bitcoin is much more of a young man or woman's game at this point
Right.
still.
Still, yeah. Not for long though. I think it's,
Yeah.
it's becoming more popular. What did we not touch on? We're giving kind of a broad overview, and I think people now understand that inheritance and inheritance investigation is really important post someone becoming not alive anymore. And it can be very, very helpful, especially if you're in a grieving process, and it can simplify all of that. What did we leave out? Are there any additional kind of tidbits of information that people should know about what you do?
I think it's not only with us, but we're talking this earlier about hiring someone to do what you can't do.
Mm.
Is that we live in an era of specialization,
Mhm.
and you have to decide for yourself how much you want to take on. There are so many other service providers in probate, which, for those not familiar, probate's the process for distributing someone's assets after they passed away.
Mhm.
And first and foremost, there's the attorney. Some people figure they'll save themselves, however much money doing probate themselves, rather hire an attorney. I If they can do it, great.
Not
Some states,
advisable generally.
it really depends on how complicated the estate is and how much time someone has to do it. Because probate, because most people are not executors more than once or twice in their lives. It's the
Mm.
matter of how much do you want to invest in the learning curve
Sure.
when you're only going to do this once. Whereas probate attorneys, some of them handle thousands and thousands of estates, so they can get things done a lot faster. Hold on one
Right.
second, please.
And your time is valuable. And,
Right, and the same thing goes for, as you mentioned, accountants. There might be issues you don't think about. Like, for example, if the deceased had income in his or her last year of life, if you're the executor, you're responsible to file a tax return
Mm.
for them. The fact that they're no longer on to pay for it. So if someone
Interesting.
earned $100,000 in a year and then died during the year, you as the executor have to file a tax return. If you want to file that yourself, fine, but you might need to get a CPA. Same thing goes for if you have assets that items you might find with, like, for example, the Pokemon cards or the Beanie Babies.
Sure.
You might just say, "Oh, my neighbor offered me, a few $100 for them. Are you sure that that's the best price, or
Mm.
do you want to consult with someone who specializes in selling those things?" We live in an era of specialization,
Mm-hmm.
and as if the internet has taught us anything, it's that there's somebody who shares a passion or an interest in pretty much everything.
Right.
So I always say, like, take your time. The other thing I would also say is, if you don't know where the will is, if you think there's a will and you don't know where it is, search for it. Don't just say, well, I haven't seen it, so therefore there must not be one.
Right.
Search for it high and low. I wouldn't say you have to necessarily tear apart walls, but I would say, look a little harder than just, in the drawers of the desk the person used. You might
Right.
want to take, if there's a family Bible, open it up. Some people put papers in there. Some people put stuff on the back of paintings or whatever. So, you want, because it's better to get that will sooner rather than later. Because if you find that later, it could totally disrupt the entire process.
Right.
You could be, it could totally change who's inheriting.
And if you are the person with the will, tell your family where you keep it. I think it might save everybody a lot of heartache.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Have multiple copies,
Mm-hmm.
and let them know, if not giving it to them, then at least let them know where to find it when when time comes.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate all of your insights today. It's really interesting stuff, and really, relevant for all of us, because everyone's going to die, and everyone is going to know somebody who passes away. Probably everybody at some point in their life will have to be an executor. And a lot of our business owners should be thinking about succession planning, and including those assets in their post-life plans. So yeah, really important stuff. How can people get in touch with you?
So you can find us on our website, inheritmore.com. My email is mzwick@inheritmore.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. And especially if you connect with Adam, then I should be pretty easy to find. And, feel free to reach out to me, send me connection requests, and do whatever I can to help you. There, I see the
Did
website.
I get it right?
Yep, that's right.
Excellent. Well, good stuff. I'll ask you to hang on the line for just a minute. I'll catch you after the show here, but there you have it, folks. Very important, very relevant stuff. It is Money Month after all. We're talking about money this month. Next month is Tech Month. So right now, money, and what could be a more important consideration for your money than you or others' post-life plans? And obviously do your own research, and make decisions that are obviously best for you. Personally, having a specialist, someone like Michael and his team who do this all the time, not only, yes, you maximize the benefit, and you also alleviate maybe some conflict between you and other parties who think that you're on the receiving end of this, that, or the other. But also, it's exceptionally stressful to go through this process, and having someone help you through the process can solve all of those things, or can at least mitigate some of that stress. So something to consider. Check out inheritmore.com. Like I said, he's a buddy of mine. That's great information. Appreciate everybody tuning in. The spiel. Same time, same place next week. See you then.